Maybe tonight you carry burdens that feel too heavy for your shoulders. Your mind races with tomorrow's uncertainties, your heart aches with unspoken pain, and the quiet darkness seems to amplify every worry, every fear, every question that has no easy answer. But what if I told you that this very moment before you surrender to sleep holds the potential to transform not just your night, but your entire life? You see, there's something profound that happens when we pause at the threshold between wakefulness and rest. It's in this sacred space that heaven meets earth, where the finite touches the infinite, and where ordinary moments become extraordinary encounters. Tonight doesn't have to end the way it began. Tonight can be the night when everything changes. Before you close your eyes, before you pull those covers up and let exhaustion take over, I want to share with you something that has the power to revolutionize your nights, restore your peace, and renew your strength. This isn't about religion or rituals or empty words whispered into the void. This is about relationship. This is about connection. This is about inviting the creator of the universe into the most vulnerable moments of your day. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine a weary traveler who has walked countless miles, carrying a pack so heavy it threatens to break his back. The sun is setting, darkness is approaching, and he finds himself at a crossroads. One path leads to a cold, lonely place where he must face the night alone with all his burdens. The other path leads to a warm, welcoming home where someone waits to take that heavy pack, to offer rest, to provide safety and comfort through the darkest hours. Every single night you stand at this same crossroads. Every evening, as fatigue settles into your bones and the day's struggles weigh on your soul, you have a choice. You can carry everything alone into the darkness, or you can choose the path that leads to divine rest, supernatural peace, and the kind of restoration that only comes from above. Most of us have been conditioned to think that sleep is simply a biological necessity, a time when our bodies shut down and our minds go blank. But what if sleep was designed to be so much more? What if those hours of rest were meant to be hours of renewal, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally? What if the night wasn't meant to be endured, but embraced as a time of healing and hope? Throughout history, the most significant encounters with the divine have often happened in the quiet hours. It was in the stillness of night that Jacob wrestled with an angel and received his blessing. It was in the darkness that Samuel heard the voice of the Lord calling his name. It was while others slept that Jesus withdrew to pray, connecting with his Father in the sacred silence. There's something about the night that strips away all pretenses, all facades, all the masks we wear during the day. In the darkness, we become authentically ourselves. Our defenses come down, our hearts become tender, and our spirits become receptive to things we might miss in the chaos of daylight hours. But here's what most people don't realize. The enemy knows this too. He understands that nighttime is when we're most vulnerable, when our thoughts can spiral into anxiety, when our fears seem magnified, when loneliness feels overwhelming. That's why he wages his most intense battles in the darkness. That's why so many people dread the night, why insomnia plagues millions, why the hours between sunset and sunrise can feel like an eternity of struggle. However, what the enemy meant for harm, God intended for good. What was designed to be your place of vulnerability can become your place of victory. What was meant to be your battlefield can become your sanctuary. The very darkness that seems threatening can become the canvas upon which divine light paints masterpieces of grace. Tonight, you have the opportunity to reclaim your nights. You have the chance to transform your bedroom into a holy place, your pillow into an altar, and your sleep into a sacred act of trust and surrender. This isn't about perfection or having all the right words or following some complicated formula. This is about opening your heart to the one who never sleeps, who watches over you with tender love, who longs to meet you in your most honest moments. Think about it this way. Throughout your day, You invite people into your spaces. You welcome friends into your home, colleagues into your workspace, family into your conversations. You share your thoughts, your plans, your concerns with those around you. But when night falls and the world grows quiet, when you're alone with just your thoughts and your pillow, who do you invite into that space? Many of us have developed the habit of bringing our phones to bed, scrolling through endless feeds, consuming content that often leaves us more anxious than before. Others bring their worries, rehearsing tomorrow's challenges or replaying today's failures. Some bring their entertainment, hoping to distract themselves into unconsciousness. But how many of us intentionally invite the presence of the divine into our nights? What would happen if you made a different choice? What would happen if instead of scrolling or worrying or distracting yourself, you chose to consciously invite God into your night? Not as a last resort when everything else fails, but as your first choice, your primary desire, your heart's deepest longing. I want to tell you about a woman named Sarah who discovered this truth in the most unlikely circumstances. For months, she had been battling chronic insomnia. Night after night, she would lie in bed, her mind racing with anxious thoughts about her job, her relationships, her future. She tried everything: sleep medications, meditation apps, white noise machines, blackout curtains. Nothing worked. One particularly difficult night, after hours of tossing and turning, she found herself crying out in desperation. She wasn't even sure she believed in God, but something deep within her soul cried out, "If you're real, if you're there, I need you. I can't do this alone anymore." In that moment of raw honesty, something shifted. The atmosphere in her room seemed to change. A peace she couldn't explain began to settle over her heart. That night, for the first time in months, Sarah slept peacefully. But more than that, she woke up with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't that all her problems had disappeared, but something fundamental had changed. She had discovered that she didn't have to face her nights alone. From that moment on, Sarah began each evening by consciously inviting God into her space. She would speak simply and honestly about her day, her fears, her hopes, her gratitude. She would ask for peace, for rest, for protection through the night hours. And night after night, she experienced a transformation that went beyond just better sleep. Her entire relationship with evening hours changed from dread to anticipation, from anxiety to peace. You see, when you invite God into your night, you're not just asking for better sleep, though that often happens. You're not just seeking relief from anxiety, though peace frequently follows. You're entering into a sacred partnership with the divine, acknowledging that you were never meant to carry life's burdens alone. There's a beautiful verse in the Psalms that says, "He gives sleep to his beloved." Think about the profound implications of that statement. Sleep isn't just something that happens to you, it's something that's given to you. It's a gift, a blessing, a demonstration of divine love. And like any gift, it's meant to be received with gratitude, with recognition of the giver. But here's what makes this even more incredible. The word beloved in that verse isn't reserved for a special few. It's not limited to those who have their lives perfectly together or who have achieved some level of spiritual superiority. Beloved means you. Right now, exactly as you are, with all your struggles and imperfections and questions, you are beloved. And sleep is one of the ways divine love is demonstrated to you every single night. When you begin to see your nights through this lens, everything changes. Your bedroom becomes more than just a place to collapse at the end of a hard day. It becomes a meeting place, a sanctuary, a space where heaven touches earth in the most intimate way. Your pillow becomes more than just a place to rest your weary head. It becomes an altar where you can lay down your burdens, your fears, your hopes, your dreams. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't require perfection. It simply requires invitation. It requires the willingness to acknowledge that you don't have to face the darkness alone, that there's someone who desires to walk with you through every season of life, including the quiet, vulnerable hours of night. Some of you might be thinking, but I've tried praying before. I've whispered desperate words into the darkness when things got really bad, when the pain was unbearable, when fear consumed every thought. And it felt like my words just bounced off the ceiling, like no one was listening, like I was talking to empty air. I understand that feeling completely. I understand the disappointment that comes when you reach out in your darkest moment and silence seems to be the only response. But what if the issue wasn't that God wasn't listening? What if the issue was that we've misunderstood what invitation really means? You see, most of us approach divine connection like we're making a phone call. We dial the number, speak our piece, hang up, and expect immediate results. We treat prayer like a vending machine where we insert our requests and expect our desired outcomes to drop down instantly. But invitation is different. Invitation is about relationship, not transaction. It's about presence, not performance. It's about opening your heart and your space to someone who wants to be with you, not just do things for you. When you invite a dear friend over for dinner, you don't hand them a list of tasks to complete. You simply enjoy their company, share your life with them, and allow their presence to enrich your evening. This is what happens when you truly invite God into your night. You're not hiring a cosmic problem solver or summoning a divine genie. You're welcoming the presence of perfect love into your most vulnerable hours. You're acknowledging that communion matters more than results, that relationship matters more than answers, that presence matters more than solutions. Let me share something that might surprise you. Some of the most profound encounters with the divine happen not when our prayers are answered the way we hoped, but when we discover that we're not alone in our unanswered questions. There's something deeply healing about knowing that someone understands your pain, sees your struggle, and chooses to sit with you in it rather than immediately taking it away. Think about the most meaningful relationships in your life. Are they meaningful because those people solve all your problems? Or are they meaningful because they show up, they listen, they care, they stay present even when they can't fix everything? Divine relationship works the same way. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the changing of circumstances, but the changing of perspective. Sometimes the most profound healing isn't the removal of pain, but the discovery that you don't have to bear that pain alone. Now, I want to address something that stops many people from taking this step. Perhaps you're thinking, I'm not good enough for this. I've made too many mistakes. I've been too far from God for too long. I've said things, done things, thought things that surely disqualify me from this kind of intimacy. Or maybe you're thinking, I don't know the right words to say. I don't have the theological education. I don't understand all the religious concepts. What if I do it wrong? Here's the beautiful truth that religious institutions sometimes forget to emphasize. God doesn't need your perfection. He doesn't require your theological sophistication. He doesn't demand that you clean up your life before you approach Him. In fact, it's often in our messiness, our brokenness, our absolute honesty about our flaws and failures that the most authentic connection happens. Consider the most powerful prayers recorded in Scripture. They're not polished, eloquent speeches. They're raw, honest, sometimes even angry cries from the heart. David wrote, "How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever?" Job demanded answers for his suffering. Martha told Jesus exactly what she thought about his timing. These weren't sanitized religious performances. These were real people having real conversations with a real God. Your invitation doesn't need to sound like something from a prayer book. It doesn't need to follow any particular formula or use specific religious language. It can be as simple as, God, I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I'm tired of facing these nights alone. I'm inviting you into my space, into my thoughts, into my fears and hopes. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm willing to find out. That's it. That's enough. That's actually more than enough because it's authentic, and authenticity is the language of relationship. When you speak from your heart, even if the words feel clumsy or inadequate, you're speaking in a language that divine love understands perfectly. But let me tell you what happens when you begin this practice consistently. At first, you might not feel anything dramatic. You might wonder if anything is actually happening. This is normal and expected. Relationship doesn't usually announce itself with fireworks and dramatic revelations. It grows quietly, gradually, like a seed taking root in fertile soil. But as days turn into weeks, something begins to shift. You start to notice a subtle change in the quality of your thoughts as you prepare for sleep. The anxious spiraling that once dominated your mind begins to quiet. The fear that used to grip your heart as darkness fell begins to loosen its hold. You find yourself looking forward to that quiet time of connection rather than dreading the long hours of night. More than that, you begin to notice changes that extend beyond the nighttime hours. The peace you experience in your bedroom begins to follow you into your daily life. The sense of being loved and watched over that you feel in the darkness begins to influence how you face the challenges of daylight. The trust you develop in those intimate moments of vulnerability begins to transform how you approach uncertainty in every area of your life. This isn't magic, and it's not psychological manipulation. This is the natural result of authentic relationship with the divine. When you consistently invite God into your most honest moments, when you regularly acknowledge His presence in your most vulnerable hours, when you repeatedly choose connection over isolation, something fundamental shifts in your understanding of who you are and how loved you are. You begin to realize that you are not an accident wandering through a meaningless universe. You are not alone in your struggles or forgotten in your pain. You are not too damaged for love or too broken for hope. You are a beloved child of the Creator, worthy of attention, deserving of care, invited into intimate relationship with the divine. This realization doesn't come all at once, and it doesn't eliminate every struggle or answer every question. But it provides a foundation of security that can weather any storm, a source of peace that can calm any anxiety, a well of love that can heal any wound. Some nights, you'll feel this presence so tangibly, it takes your breath away. You'll experience a peace that defies explanation, a comfort that surpasses understanding, a love that overwhelms your heart. Other nights, the connection might feel less obvious, more subtle. But just as the sun continues to shine even when clouds obscure our view, divine presence remains constant even when our awareness of it fluctuates. The key is consistency, not perfection. The goal is relationship, not performance. The invitation is always there, waiting for your response, hoping for your participation, longing for your company. Every single night, without exception, you have the opportunity to experience this sacred connection. Every evening, as the world grows quiet and your defenses come down, heaven stands ready to meet you in that holy space between wakefulness and sleep. Tonight could be the night when everything changes. Tonight could be the beginning of a transformation that extends far beyond better sleep or reduced anxiety. Tonight could be when you discover that you were never meant to face life's challenges alone, that you have access to wisdom beyond your understanding, strength beyond your capacity, love beyond your imagination. The choice is yours. The invitation is extended. The door is open. All that remains is your response. All that's needed is your willingness to whisper those simple words, "God, I invite you into my night." And with those simple words, you open the door to something extraordinary. You might wonder what happens next, what you should expect, how this invitation actually works in practical terms. The beauty lies in its simplicity, yet the depth of what unfolds can touch the very core of your being. When you speak that invitation, you're not performing a ritual or reciting a formula. You're acknowledging a truth that has existed since the beginning of time. You were created for connection, designed for relationship, fashioned for fellowship with your Creator. In that moment of invitation, you're simply aligning yourself with the way things were always meant to be. Picture this, a master artist who has painted a breathtaking landscape, every detail crafted with love and intention. Now imagine that painting coming alive, the painted figures stepping out of the canvas to have a conversation with their creator. That's the kind of relationship that becomes possible when you invite the divine into your personal space. You're not just admiring God from a distance, you're entering into dialogue with the one who formed you. But let's be honest about what this looks like in real life. You won't necessarily hear an audible voice or see dramatic visions. Most of the time, divine communication comes in whispers rather than shouts, in gentle impressions rather than overwhelming manifestations. It might be a sudden sense of calm washing over your anxious heart. It could be a random memory that brings unexpected comfort. Sometimes it's simply the gradual lifting of a burden you didn't even realize you were carrying. I think about a man named David who struggled with overwhelming guilt from past mistakes. Every night his mind would replay scenes from his past, condemning thoughts that made sleep nearly impossible. One evening, exhausted from the mental torment, he decided to try something different. Instead of fighting the thoughts or trying to distract himself, he simply said, "God, I'm drowning in shame. I don't know how to forgive myself. I'm inviting you into this mess." What happened next wasn't dramatic. There was no lightning bolt of forgiveness, no mystical experience that erased his past. Instead, David noticed something subtle but profound. The voice of condemnation that usually screamed accusations began to quiet. In its place, he sensed something he could only describe as understanding, as if someone who knew everything about his failures still chose to sit beside him rather than condemn him. Night after night, David continued this practice. He would acknowledge his shame, his regret, his desperate need for peace, and he would invite divine presence into those painful places. Slowly, gradually, the landscape of his heart began to change. The shame didn't disappear overnight, but it began to transform into something else: gratitude for grace, amazement at unconditional love, wonder at the possibility of new beginnings. This is what authentic spiritual encounter looks like for most of us. It's not about dramatic emotional highs or supernatural phenomena. It's about the gradual healing of wounded places, the slow transformation of broken thinking, the gentle restoration of hope in hearts that have forgotten how to dream. When you consistently invite God into your nights, you begin to notice patterns of divine kindness that might have gone unrecognized before. That unexpected phone call from a friend just when you needed encouragement. The song on the radio that spoke directly to your situation. The book that fell open to exactly the page you needed to read. The stranger who smiled at you on your worst day. These aren't coincidences. They're love letters from heaven, reminders that you're seen, known, and cherished. Your nights become a classroom where you learn to recognize these expressions of divine care. In the quiet hours, away from the noise and distraction of daily life, your spiritual senses become more acute. You develop what some call eyes to see and ears to hear, the ways that love is constantly reaching toward you. Consider Maria, a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Every night, she would collapse into bed feeling defeated, wondering how she could possibly face another day of struggle. The weight of responsibility felt crushing, and loneliness seemed to seep into every corner of her small apartment. One particularly difficult evening, after her youngest child had finally fallen asleep, Maria found herself staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. In her exhaustion, she whispered, "I don't know if you're listening, but I can't do this alone anymore. I'm inviting you into this chaos, into this fear, into this loneliness." The immediate result wasn't a miraculous change in her circumstances. She still had to work 2 jobs. Bills still needed to be paid. The challenges of single parenthood didn't magically disappear, but something fundamental shifted in how she carried those challenges. Maria began to notice moments of unexpected grace throughout her days. A co-worker would offer to cover an extra shift just when she needed it most. Her children would surprise her with unsolicited hugs that seemed to come exactly when her heart needed them. She would find herself humming songs she didn't remember learning, songs that filled her with unexplainable hope. Most significantly, her nights transformed from times of worry and desperation into moments of connection and renewal. She began having conversations with God as naturally as she would chat with a trusted friend. She would share her fears, her dreams for her children, her gratitude for small blessings, her hopes for the future. These weren't one-sided monologues. In the quiet of her heart, Maria began to sense responses, not audible words, but impressions, feelings, gentle guidance that seemed to come from beyond herself. When faced with difficult decisions, she would take them to these nighttime conversations and often wake with clarity she hadn't possessed before. When overwhelmed by circumstances, she would pour out her heart and find herself strengthened by a peace that had no logical source. This is the mystery and the beauty of inviting divine presence into your nights. You don't lose your humanity or your responsibility to make wise choices and take appropriate action. Instead, you gain a partner in the journey, a source of wisdom and strength that supplements your own resources without replacing your need to participate fully in your own life. Think about it this way. When you're trying to move a heavy piece of furniture, having someone help doesn't mean you stop pushing. It means the burden becomes manageable, the task becomes possible, the struggle becomes shared. Divine partnership works similarly. Your problems don't automatically disappear, but they become bearable. Your questions don't all get immediate answers, but you stop feeling alone in the uncertainty. Your pain doesn't vanish, but it gains meaning and purpose. This is why the nighttime invitation is so powerful. It's in those vulnerable moments that authentic relationship flourishes. When your defenses are down, when you're too tired to pretend everything is fine, when you're too honest to put on a spiritual performance, that's when real connection becomes possible. Some people worry that God only wants to hear from them when they have their act together, when they can approach with clean hands and pure motives. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Divine love is most attracted to honesty, most drawn to authenticity, most responsive to genuine need. Your brokenness isn't a barrier to connection. It's often the very thing that makes deep relationship possible. I remember reading about a woman who had been taught that prayer required formal language and proper posture. For years, she struggled to maintain what she thought was the right way to approach God. Her prayers felt stilted and artificial, and she often wondered why she felt so disconnected despite her sincere efforts. One night, overwhelmed by a family crisis, all her careful protocols broke down. She found herself crying out in raw, unfiltered emotion, using language that would have horrified her previous religious sensibilities. She poured out her anger, her fear, her confusion, holding nothing back. And in that moment of complete honesty, she experienced a presence and peace she had never known in all her years of proper prayer. This became a turning point in her spiritual life. She realized that divine love isn't offended by human emotion or frightened by honest struggle. In fact, it's drawn to authenticity, like water flowing toward the lowest place. Her nighttime conversations became times of complete transparency, and her relationship with the divine deepened beyond anything she had imagined possible. Your invitation doesn't need to follow anyone else's script or match anyone else's experience. It can be angry or peaceful, desperate or grateful, confused or confident. What matters is that it's yours, that it comes from the real place in your heart where you actually live, rather than from some idealized version of who you think you should be. As you begin this practice, you might find that your understanding of prayer itself begins to evolve. Instead of seeing it as a formal religious activity that happens at designated times in specific positions, you start to recognize it as an ongoing conversation, a continuous awareness of divine presence that can happen anywhere, anytime. Your bedroom becomes a place where this awareness is particularly focused and intentional. It's where you consciously set aside the distractions and demands of the day to create space for connection. It's where you practice the art of divine dialogue, learning to speak honestly and listen carefully. This listening aspect is crucial but often misunderstood. You're not waiting for a booming voice from heaven or expecting mystical visions. You're developing sensitivity to the subtle ways that divine guidance and comfort manifest in your experience. It might be a gradual shift in perspective that helps you see a situation differently. It could be an unexpected memory that provides exactly the encouragement you need. Sometimes it's simply the gift of peaceful sleep after a time of honest conversation. The more you practice this nighttime invitation, the more natural it becomes. What might initially feel awkward or uncertain gradually transforms into the most natural thing in the world. You find yourself looking forward to those quiet moments of connection, anticipating the peace that comes from laying down your burdens at the end of each day. Your sleep itself begins to change. Instead of being an escape from life's challenges, it becomes a form of trust, a way of releasing control and allowing divine care to minister to you in your unconscious hours. You start to wake more refreshed, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. There's often a sense of having been tended to during the night, of having received some form of care that goes beyond what rest alone can provide. Dreams may become more meaningful, sometimes offering insight or comfort that speaks directly to your waking concerns. But even when you don't remember dreaming, there's often a sense of having been in good hands, of having been watched over and protected through the vulnerable hours of sleep. This practice also begins to influence how you approach difficulties during your waking hours. When you've developed the habit of bringing everything to divine attention during your nighttime conversations, it becomes natural to maintain that awareness throughout the day. Challenges that once would have sent you into panic mode become opportunities to remember that you're not handling life alone. You start to recognize what some call divine appointments. Moments when exactly the right person says exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. Circumstances align in ways that seem too perfectly timed to be mere coincidence. Resources appear just when you need them. Doors open just when you need them to. This isn't about adopting a naive belief that nothing bad will ever happen or that all your problems will be magically solved. Life remains life, with all its complexity and unpredictability. But your capacity to navigate that complexity expands dramatically when you know you're not navigating alone. The invitation you extend tonight isn't just about tonight. It's about establishing a pattern, creating a rhythm, developing a relationship that can sustain you through whatever seasons lie ahead. It's about discovering that the God of the universe is also the God of your bedroom. The divine who spoke stars into existence is also intimately concerned with your personal struggles and dreams. As you prepare for sleep tonight, as you feel the familiar weight of the day settling on your shoulders, remember that you have a choice. You can face the night alone, carrying everything yourself, hoping that somehow rest will be enough to prepare you for tomorrow's challenges. Or you can choose the path of invitation, opening your heart and your space to the one who promises never to leave you or forsake you. The words don't have to be perfect. The faith doesn't have to be complete. The understanding doesn't have to be comprehensive. All that's required is the willingness to say, I don't want to do this alone anymore. I'm inviting you into my night, into my heart, into my life. And with that simple invitation, you step into a relationship that has the power to transform not just your nights, but every aspect of your existence. You discover that you are loved beyond measure, valued beyond calculation, and never ever alone. What happens in those quiet moments after you've spoken that invitation? What unfolds in the sacred space between your words and sleep? This is where the true mystery begins, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, where your bedroom transforms from a place of mere rest into a sanctuary of divine encounter. The first thing you might notice is a subtle shift in the atmosphere itself, not necessarily something you can see or touch, but something you can feel. It's as if the very air becomes charged with possibility, thick with presence. The walls that once seemed to close in around your worries now feel like protective boundaries, creating a holy space where vulnerability is safe and honesty is welcomed. Your breathing begins to change, becoming deeper, more intentional. The tension that has been holding your shoulders rigid starts to release. The clenched jaw from carrying the day's stress begins to soften. This isn't just relaxation in the physical sense. It's the body's response to the soul's recognition that safety has arrived, that burden-bearing is no longer a solo endeavor. But perhaps the most profound shift happens in the realm of your thoughts. That relentless mental chatter that usually dominates the transition from wakefulness to sleep begins to quiet. The endless loop of tomorrow's to-do list, the replay of today's mistakes, the anxious rehearsal of imagined scenarios, all of this starts to fade into the background as something more peaceful takes center stage. This doesn't mean your mind goes blank or that all concerns magically disappear. Rather, it's as if a gentle hand reaches into the chaos of your thoughts and begins to sort them, organizing them in a way that makes them manageable rather than overwhelming. The urgent seems less urgent. The catastrophic seems less catastrophic. The impossible seems less impossible. Consider the experience of Rachel, a teacher who had been struggling with a difficult classroom situation for months. Every night, she would lie awake, replaying confrontations with challenging students, imagining angry phone calls from parents, worrying about administrative reviews. The anxiety had become so intense that she was considering leaving the profession she once loved. One evening, at her wit's end, Rachel decided to try something different. Instead of wrestling with her thoughts alone, she spoke into the darkness. "I don't know what to do about this situation. I'm scared, I'm frustrated, and I'm starting to doubt whether I'm cut out for this job. I'm inviting you into this mess because I can't figure it out on my own." What happened next surprised her. The familiar spiral of anxious thoughts didn't stop immediately, but something began to shift in how she related to them. Instead of feeling trapped by her worries, she began to observe them with a kind of gentle detachment, as if she were no longer alone in examining them. The thoughts were still there, but they no longer held the same power to torment her. As the nights passed and Rachel continued this practice, she began to notice subtle changes in how she approached her classroom challenges. Ideas for different strategies would come to her in quiet moments. She found herself responding to difficult situations with more patience than she thought she possessed. Conversations with troubled students became opportunities for connection rather than confrontation. Most remarkably, Rachel began to see her students differently. Where once she had seen only problems and obstacles, she started to recognize hurting children in need of understanding. This shift in perspective didn't come from her own effort or psychological techniques. It felt like a gift, a new set of eyes that allowed her to see beyond surface behaviors to deeper needs. This is what often happens when you consistently invite divine presence into your struggles. Your perspective begins to align with a wisdom that transcends your own understanding. You don't suddenly become superhuman or immune to difficulty, but you do gain access to resources beyond your natural capacity. You see situations through the lens of love rather than fear, possibility rather than limitation, hope rather than despair. The transformation isn't always dramatic or immediate. Sometimes it's so gradual that you barely notice it happening until you look back and realize how different your responses have become. The co-worker who used to trigger intense irritation now evokes compassion. The financial pressure that once caused panic now feels like a challenge to be navigated rather than a crisis to be survived. The relationship conflict that seemed insurmountable now appears as an opportunity for growth and deeper understanding. This shift happens because invitation creates space for divine influence in your thought patterns, your emotional responses, your decision-making processes. It's not that your personality changes or that you lose your individual identity. Rather, it's as if the best version of yourself begins to emerge more consistently, as if you're being coached by the ultimate life expert who knows exactly what you're capable of becoming. Your nights become a time of not just rest, but restoration in the truest sense. While your body sleeps, something deeper is being renewed. Old wounds find healing, bitter memories lose their sting. Fearful projections about the future are replaced with quiet confidence. You wake not just physically refreshed, but emotionally renewed, spiritually strengthened, mentally clarified. This process isn't always comfortable. Sometimes divine presence brings to light things you'd rather keep hidden, even from yourself. Patterns of thinking that need to change, attitudes that need adjustment, behaviors that need modification. But this exposure happens in the context of unconditional love, making it healing rather than condemning. Think about visiting a doctor when you're ill. The examination might reveal problems you'd rather not face, but you submit to it because you know the goal is healing, not harm. Divine encounter works similarly. The light that reveals your flaws is the same light that provides the power to change them. The love that exposes your weaknesses is the same love that supplies the strength to overcome them. James discovered this when he began inviting God into his nightly routine. For years he had struggled with anger that seemed to erupt without warning, damaging his relationships and leaving him feeling ashamed and confused. He had tried anger management techniques, therapy, meditation, but nothing seemed to address the root of the problem. During one of his nighttime conversations, James found himself being completely honest about his anger for the first time. Instead of making excuses or minimizing its impact, he acknowledged the full extent of the damage it had caused. He confessed his fear that he might be fundamentally flawed, that he might hurt the people he loved most. In the weeks that followed, James began to notice something unexpected happening during these honest conversations. Memories began surfacing, not traumatic memories, but simple moments from his childhood when he had felt powerless, unheard, dismissed. He began to understand that his adult anger was often a response to feeling those same emotions, an attempt to regain power in situations where he felt vulnerable. This insight didn't come from psychological analysis or therapeutic techniques. It emerged naturally during his times of open dialogue with divine presence, as if someone who knew him better than he knew himself was gently helping him connect the dots. With understanding came compassion for himself, and with compassion came the ability to make different choices. James still felt the familiar surge of anger in triggering situations, but now he had context for those feelings. Instead of being overwhelmed by them, he could recognize them as signals pointing to deeper needs. Instead of reacting automatically, he could pause and choose responses that addressed those underlying needs, rather than simply expressing the surface emotion. This is the kind of transformation that becomes possible when you consistently create space for divine wisdom in your most honest moments. You don't just manage your problems better, you begin to understand them differently. You don't just cope with your struggles, you start to see how they can become pathways to growth and healing. Your bedroom conversations become a safe place to explore the deeper questions that daylight hours often don't allow. Why do I react so strongly to certain situations? What am I really afraid of when this particular anxiety strikes? What does this recurring pattern in my relationships reveal about my underlying beliefs about myself? These aren't questions you have to answer on your own. In fact, Trying to figure everything out through pure mental effort often leads to more confusion rather than clarity. But when you bring these questions into divine dialogue, when you invite infinite wisdom to illuminate your finite understanding, insights begin to emerge that you could never have reached through analysis alone. The beauty of this process is that it honors both your humanity and your need for something beyond humanity. You remain responsible for your choices and actions, but you're not left to navigate life's complexities with only your limited perspective and resources. You become a participant in your own transformation rather than the sole engineer of it. Your sleep patterns begin to reflect this deeper sense of security and trust. Instead of tossing and turning while your mind races through endless scenarios, you find yourself able to release the day's concerns into capable hands. Sleep becomes less of an escape from reality and more of a conscious act of faith, a way of saying, "I've done what I can do today. I trust that you'll take care of what I cannot." This doesn't mean you become passive or irresponsible. Rather, you develop the wisdom to distinguish between what requires your action and what requires your surrender. You learn to give your best effort to what's within your control while releasing anxiety about what's beyond it. This balance between engagement and surrender, between effort and trust, becomes one of the most practical benefits of your nighttime practice. Dreams often become more vivid and meaningful during this season of your life. Not necessarily prophetic or mystical, but relevant and encouraging. You might dream of solutions to problems you've been wrestling with, or find yourself comforted by scenarios that address your deepest fears. Sometimes you wake with songs in your heart, words of encouragement echoing in your mind, or simply an inexplicable sense of hope that carries you through challenging days. But even when dreams don't come or aren't remembered, there's often a sense of having been ministered to during sleep. You wake feeling like you've been in good hands, like someone has been watching over you through the vulnerable hours of unconsciousness. This feeling isn't based on dramatic experiences or supernatural encounters. It's simply the natural result of going to sleep in the awareness of divine presence and care. As this practice becomes more established in your life, you begin to notice its influence extending far beyond the bedroom. The peace you experience during your nighttime conversations starts to influence how you handle daytime stress. The trust you develop in those intimate moments begins to affect how you approach uncertain situations. The love you feel in the darkness begins to change how you see yourself and others in the light. Relationships begin to improve, not because you're trying harder to be a better person, but because you're becoming more secure in your own identity as someone who is deeply loved. When you know you're cherished by the Creator of the universe, you're less likely to seek validation from others in unhealthy ways. When you're confident in divine acceptance, you're more able to accept others as they are, rather than trying to change them to meet your needs. Work situations become less stressful because you carry with you a quiet confidence that you're not alone in facing challenges. Financial pressures feel less overwhelming because you've experienced provision in unexpected ways and developed trust that needs will be met. Health concerns don't disappear, but they're held in a context of hope rather than despair. This transformation isn't about adopting a naive optimism that ignores reality. It's about developing a deeper vision that sees beyond immediate circumstances to eternal truths about love, purpose, and meaning. And it's about learning to hold both the difficulty of current situations and the promise of divine faithfulness in tension, allowing both to be true without letting either cancel out the other. Your nights become a time of not just physical rest, but spiritual renewal, emotional healing, and mental refreshing. You go to bed as one person and wake up slightly more transformed, gradually becoming the person you were always meant to be. The process is gentle but persistent, subtle but profound, working changes in you that you might not even notice until others begin to comment on the difference they see. This is the gift that waits for you tonight and every night thereafter. This is the transformation that begins with a simple invitation and unfolds into a lifetime of divine companionship. This is what happens when you choose to believe that you don't have to face the darkness alone, that there's someone who desires to meet you in your most vulnerable moments and walk with you toward wholeness. The invitation remains open. The presence remains available. The transformation remains possible. All that's needed is your willingness to open the door of your heart and whisper into the darkness, "Come and be with me tonight, Ajim." And as you speak those words into the quiet of your room, something remarkable begins to unfold. The invitation you've extended doesn't echo back empty or fade into silence. Instead, it finds its way to the very heart of divine love, where every honest cry is heard, every genuine longing is understood, and every weary soul is welcomed home. You might wonder what divine presence actually feels like when it arrives. Does it announce itself with fanfare? Does it require special spiritual sensitivity to detect? The truth is both simpler and more profound than you might expect. Divine presence often feels like the most natural thing in the world, like coming home to a place you've always belonged, but somehow forgotten how to find. It might begin as a subtle warmth that seems to emanate from somewhere deeper than your physical body. Not the surface warmth of blankets or heated air, but something that touches the core of who you are. It's the warmth of being truly seen and completely accepted, of being known in your entirety and loved without condition or reservation. Sometimes it feels like a gentle weight settling over you, not heavy or oppressive, but comforting in the way a child feels secure under a beloved blanket. It's the weight of protection, of being covered and shielded from the harsh winds of worry and fear. Under this covering, your restless thoughts begin to still, your anxious heart begins to calm, and your weary spirit begins to find the rest it has been desperately seeking. The atmosphere in your room shifts in ways that are difficult to describe, but impossible to miss once you've experienced them. The very air seems to become more breathable, as if oxygen itself has been infused with peace. Colors might seem softer, shadows less threatening, silence more welcoming. Your bedroom transforms from merely a place where you sleep into a sanctuary where heaven touches earth in the most intimate way possible. Listen carefully to what happens in your heart during these moments. That voice of condemnation that usually provides commentary on every failure, every inadequacy, every reason why you're not worthy of love or rest. That voice begins to quiet, not because you're forcing it into silence, but because it's being replaced by something infinitely more powerful, the gentle whisper of divine affection speaking truth over your life. Where accusation once dominated, acceptance takes residence. Where fear once ruled, faith begins to flourish. Where loneliness once echoed through the chambers of your heart, the warm presence of divine companionship fills every empty space. This isn't positive thinking or psychological manipulation. This is the natural result of authentic encounter with the one who created you for relationship, fashioned you for fellowship, and designed you for divine connection. Consider what this means for the thoughts that usually torment you during nighttime hours, those replays of embarrassing moments, those rehearsals of tomorrow's potential disasters, those endless loops of self-criticism. All of these begin to lose their power when divine perspective enters your mental landscape. Not because problems disappear, but because they're placed in a context larger than your immediate circumstances. The mistake you made at work today doesn't define your worth when you remember you're cherished by infinite love. The difficult conversation awaiting you tomorrow doesn't overwhelm you when you know you won't face it alone. The financial pressure that seemed crushing becomes manageable when you recall the countless ways provision has appeared in your life, often from sources you never could have anticipated. Your mind, which moments before felt like a battlefield where worries waged war against hope, transforms into a peaceful garden where divine truth takes root and begins to flourish. Thoughts of gratitude replace thoughts of complaint. Memories of faithfulness overshadow fears of abandonment. Visions of possibility push aside expectations of failure. This mental transformation doesn't happen through sheer willpower or positive affirmations. It occurs naturally when divine light illuminates the landscape of your thoughts, revealing truths that were always there but hidden beneath layers of accumulated fear and doubt. Like sunrise gradually revealing the beauty of a landscape that darkness had concealed, divine presence slowly unveils the reality of how loved, how valuable, how significant you truly are. But let's talk about what happens in your emotions during these sacred encounters. Throughout your day, feelings might have overwhelmed you like waves crashing against an unprotected shore. Anger, sadness, anxiety, frustration, all demanding attention, all insisting on immediate response, all threatening to sweep you away in their intensity. When divine presence enters your emotional world, it's not that these feelings instantly disappear. Rather, it's as if someone builds a breakwater around your heart, creating a calm harbor where emotions can exist without destroying you. You can feel sad without drowning in despair. You can acknowledge anger without being consumed by rage. You can recognize fear without being paralyzed by terror. This emotional safety comes from knowing that your feelings are witnessed by someone who understands their source, their purpose, and their proper place in your life. Divine love doesn't dismiss your emotions or minimize their validity. Instead, it provides a container large enough to hold them all while preventing any single feeling from defining your entire reality. Margaret learned this during a season of profound grief following the loss of her spouse. For months after his death, nighttime had become her enemy. In the darkness, sorrow would wash over her in waves so intense she wondered if she might drown in them. Sleep seemed impossible when every position in bed reminded her of absence, when every sound in the house emphasized the silence where his voice should have been. One night, when the pain felt unbearable, Margaret found herself speaking aloud to the empty room. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to live without him. I don't know how to face another day, another night, another year of this emptiness. If you're there, if you care, I need you to help me carry this." What happened next wasn't the removal of her grief. That would have been neither realistic nor appropriate. Instead, Margaret experienced something she could only describe as the sharing of her burden. The sorrow remained, but she no longer carried it alone. The tears still came, but they felt cleansing rather than destructive. The loneliness persisted, but it was accompanied by a sense of divine companionship that made it bearable. Night after night, Margaret continued to bring her grief into these conversations. She would speak about missing her husband's laugh, his wisdom, his presence beside her in bed. She would cry about dreams they would never fulfill together, places they would never visit, conversations they would never have. And in response, she would feel held, comforted, understood in ways that surpassed what any human consolation could provide. Gradually, Margaret's grief began to transform, not disappearing, but becoming something that connected her to love rather than separating her from it. She began to experience gratitude for the years they had shared, rather than focusing only on the years they had lost. She started to see her husband's influence continuing in her life, even after his physical presence had ended. Most remarkably, she discovered that her capacity for compassion toward others who were grieving had expanded exponentially through her own journey of supported sorrow. This is what divine presence does with our most difficult emotions. It doesn't eliminate them, but it transforms our relationship with them. Pain becomes purposeful, sorrow becomes sacred. Even anger can become a pathway to justice and positive change when held within the context of divine love. Your physical body also responds to these encounters in remarkable ways. Tension that you've carried for so long you've forgotten what relaxation feels like begins to release from muscles you didn't even know were clenched. Your breathing deepens naturally, no longer the shallow, anxious gulps of someone constantly braced for the next crisis, but the steady, peaceful rhythm of someone who knows they're safe. Your heart rate slows to a calmer cadence. The tight band of stress that often wraps around your chest begins to loosen. Your jaw unclenches, your shoulders drop, your hands relax from fists into open palms. This isn't just the result of lying down to rest. It's your body's response to your soul's recognition that protection has arrived, that burden sharing is now available, that the hypervigilance required for survival is no longer necessary. Sleep, when it finally comes, takes on an entirely different quality. Instead of the fitful, restless unconsciousness of exhaustion, you experience what can only be described as sacred rest. Your dreams, when they occur, often carry themes of healing, hope, and restoration. You might find yourself in conversations with loved ones who have passed on, receiving wisdom and comfort that lingers long after waking. You might dream of solutions to problems that have been troubling you, awakening with clarity you didn't possess before sleep. But even when dreams don't come or aren't remembered, there's often a sense of having been tended to during the night hours. You wake feeling not just physically rested, but spiritually refreshed, as if some invisible gardener has been working in the soil of your soul while you slept, planting seeds of hope, watering shoots of faith, pruning away dead branches of despair. The morning light that filters through your windows carries a different quality when you've spent the night in conscious communion with divine presence. Instead of harsh illumination exposing all the problems you'll need to face, it feels like gentle awakening from a loving parent, softly calling you into a new day filled with possibility and promise. You rise not with dread for the challenges ahead, but with quiet confidence that you won't face them alone. The problems are still there, the difficult relationship, the financial concern, the health issue, the work stress. But they no longer loom over you like mountains too high to climb. Instead, they appear as hills that can be navigated one step at a time, with divine assistance available for each stage of the journey. This transformation in how you begin each day has ripple effects that extend far beyond your personal experience. Your family notices the change in your demeanor, the peace in your presence, the hope in your voice. Co-workers comment on your increased patience, your improved problem-solving abilities, your enhanced creativity under pressure. Friends seek you out for advice and comfort, sensing something in you that they long for in their own lives. You haven't become perfect or problem-free, but you have become more whole, more integrated, more aligned with who you were always meant to be. The invitation you extended in your darkest hour has initiated a process of transformation that continues day by day, night by night, encounter by encounter. Thomas experienced this when he began inviting divine presence into his struggles with chronic anxiety. For years, his mind had been a constant whirlwind of worst-case scenarios, catastrophic predictions, and paralyzing what-if questions. Medication helped to some degree, therapy provided useful tools, but the underlying current of fear remained a constant companion. When Thomas first whispered his invitation into the darkness of his bedroom, he was skeptical that anything would change. He had tried so many approaches, invested in so many solutions, that hope itself had become a luxury he could barely afford. But desperation has a way of opening doors that skepticism keeps locked, and his need was greater than his doubt. The first few nights brought subtle shifts that Thomas almost dismissed as wishful thinking. The anxious thoughts were still there, but they seemed to have less urgency, less power to hijack his entire mental process. Instead of spiraling into panic at the first sign of worry, he found himself able to observe his thoughts with something approaching detachment, as if he were watching clouds pass across the sky rather than being swept away by a tornado. As weeks passed, Thomas began to notice that his anxiety, while still present, was no longer the dominant voice in his internal dialogue. Other voices began to emerge, voices of wisdom, encouragement, and perspective that seemed to come from beyond his own limited understanding. When faced with a challenging situation, instead of immediately jumping to catastrophic conclusions, he found himself pausing to consider possibilities he might have missed, resources he might have overlooked, strengths he might have underestimated. This wasn't the result of mental exercises or cognitive behavioral techniques, though Thomas continued to value those tools. It was as if his regular conversations with divine presence were gradually rewiring his default responses, replacing automatic anxiety with automatic trust, exchanging reflexive fear for reflexive faith. The change was so gradual that Thomas barely noticed it until a crisis at work, exactly the kind of situation that would have previously sent him into days of panic, was met with an unexpected sense of calm and clarity. He found himself thinking through solutions rather than obsessing over problems, reaching out for support rather than isolating in fear, taking constructive action rather than being paralyzed by possibility. This is what consistent divine dialogue does in a life over time. It doesn't eliminate challenges or guarantee smooth sailing, but it fundamentally alters your capacity to navigate whatever storms may arise. You develop what might be called spiritual sea legs, the ability to maintain your balance even when circumstances are turbulent, to keep moving forward even when the path isn't clear. Your nights become a time of recalibration, where the day's experiences are processed through the filter of divine wisdom, where tomorrow's challenges are approached with divine resources, where your soul finds the nourishment it needs to sustain you through whatever lies ahead. The bedroom that once felt like a place of vulnerability becomes a fortress of strength, a launching pad for each new day's adventures. But perhaps most remarkably, you begin to discover that the divine presence you invite into your nights doesn't confine itself to those hours. The relationship that deepens in darkness begins to influence your daylight hours as well. The peace you experience in your bedroom starts to follow you into your living room, your kitchen, your workplace, your car. The wisdom that speaks to you in whispered conversations begins to guide your public decisions and private choices. You find yourself handling difficult people with more patience, approaching complex problems with greater creativity, facing uncertain futures with increased faith. Not because you've become superhuman, but because you've learned to tap into resources that extend beyond your natural abilities. You've discovered that you were never meant to navigate life's challenges with only your own limited strength and wisdom. The invitation you spoke into the darkness of your room becomes a doorway into a way of living that transforms every aspect of your existence. Relationships improve, not because others change, but because you bring divine love into your interactions. Work becomes more meaningful, not because tasks become easier, but because you begin to see purpose in even mundane activities. Challenges become opportunities for growth rather than threats to your security. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it's not a steady upward trajectory without setbacks or struggles. There will still be nights when anxiety creeps back in, when old patterns of thinking reassert themselves, when divine presence feels distant or unclear. But these temporary dips no longer define your overall experience. They become exceptions rather than the rule, valleys that you pass through rather than permanent places of residence. More importantly, you learn that divine presence doesn't depend on your feelings or your perfect performance. It's not withdrawn when you doubt or struggle, not contingent on your ability to maintain constant faith or unwavering peace. The love that meets you in your darkness is steadfast, patient, enduring, qualities that gradually become part of your own character as you spend time in that presence. Your bedroom conversations become a school where you learn not just to receive divine love, but to extend it to others. The patience shown to you in your weakness becomes patience you can offer to family members in their struggles. The forgiveness you experience for your failures becomes forgiveness you can grant to those who have hurt you. The hope that sustains you through difficult seasons becomes hope you can share with friends facing their own challenges. This is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of inviting divine presence into your nights. It doesn't just change you, it changes your capacity to be an agent of change in the world around you. Your transformed life becomes a testament to the reality of divine love, a living example of what becomes possible when someone chooses to believe they don't have to face life's darkness alone. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, remember that this invitation isn't just about getting better rest or reducing anxiety. Though those benefits often follow, it's about stepping into the relationship for which you were created, discovering the love that has been seeking you since before you were born, accessing the resources that can sustain you through any storm life may bring. The words you speak don't need to be eloquent or theologically precise. They don't need to follow any particular format or include specific religious language. They simply need to be honest, authentic, and offered with whatever faith you can muster, however small that might be. Even if you're not sure you believe, even if you're carrying doubts alongside your hopes, even if you've been disappointed by previous attempts at spiritual connection, the invitation remains open, the love remains available, the transformation remains possible. So as you settle into your bed tonight, as the familiar weight of the day's concerns presses down upon you, consider extending that simple invitation. I don't want to face this night alone. I'm inviting you into my space, into my thoughts, into my heart. I don't know exactly what that means or how it works, but I'm willing to find out. And then rest in the knowledge that your invitation has been heard, your need has been seen, your heart has been welcomed into the most profound relationship possible. Rest in the promise that you are loved beyond measure, valued beyond calculation, and never ever truly alone. As dawn breaks and you open your eyes after a night spent in divine communion, you carry with you more than just the memory of peaceful rest. You carry within your spirit the lingering fragrance of heaven, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've been in the presence of perfect love, and the unshakable assurance that what began in darkness will continue to illuminate every aspect of your waking hours. This is where the true adventure begins. The relationship that deepened in the sanctuary of your bedroom doesn't remain confined to those sacred walls. Like water overflowing from a well-filled vessel, the peace you've received, the love you've experienced, the wisdom you've gained, begins to spill into every corner of your life, transforming not just how you sleep, but how you live. You walk into your kitchen that morning, and something is different. The same coffee maker, the same breakfast routine, the same morning light streaming through familiar windows, yet everything feels touched by grace. That mundane task of preparing your morning meal becomes an opportunity for gratitude, a moment to acknowledge the countless provisions that sustain your life. The steam rising from your cup becomes a visible reminder of invisible blessings, the warmth in your hands a tangible expression of divine care. Your commute to work takes on new meaning. Where once you might have dreaded the traffic, the crowded subway, the rush of people all hurrying toward their destinations, now you see something else. You see fellow travelers, each carrying their own burdens, each fighting their own battles, each in need of the same love and grace that met you in your darkness. Your heart begins to expand with compassion for the hurried businessman checking his phone anxiously, the tired mother trying to manage restless children, the elderly person struggling with heavy bags. This isn't manufactured sympathy or forced kindness. This is the natural overflow of a heart that has been filled to overflowing with divine love. When you know yourself to be deeply cherished, when you've experienced unconditional acceptance in your most vulnerable moments, when you've tasted grace in your greatest failures, Something within you naturally extends toward others with the same tenderness you've received. The workplace that once felt like a battlefield becomes an opportunity for ministry. Not the preachy, pushy kind that makes people uncomfortable, but the quiet ministry of presence, of patience, of treating each person you encounter as someone worthy of dignity and respect. Your difficult coworker who usually triggers your worst responses suddenly seems less like an enemy and more like someone who might be fighting battles you know nothing about. The impossible deadline that would normally send you into panic mode becomes a chance to demonstrate the peace that surpasses understanding. Maria discovered this transformation in the most unexpected place, the grocery store checkout line. For years, this had been one of her least favorite parts of the week, standing behind impatient customers, dealing with surly cashiers, feeling rushed and stressed as she tried to manage her shopping list and keep her children entertained. It was a microcosm of everything that felt wrong with modern life, hurried, impersonal, frustrating. But after several weeks of inviting divine presence into her nights, Maria noticed something remarkable happening during these routine errands. The elderly woman fumbling with her purse no longer seemed like an obstacle to her efficiency, but like someone's beloved grandmother who deserved patience and kindness. The teenage cashier having a bad day no longer triggered her irritation, but evoked her compassion for someone young and learning. The crying baby in the cart behind her no longer grated on her nerves, but reminded her of the precious fragility of life. More than changing her perspective, Maria found herself naturally offering small acts of kindness that she never would have considered before, helping the elderly woman count her change, offering an encouraging word to the stressed cashier, making funny faces at the crying baby to bring a moment of joy. These weren't calculated acts of goodness or attempts to earn spiritual points. They were the spontaneous overflow of a heart that had been transformed by consistent encounters with divine love. What amazed Maria most was how these small acts of kindness seemed to create ripples of positivity that extended far beyond the immediate moment. The cashier would smile more genuinely at the next customer. The elderly woman would leave feeling valued and seen. The baby's mother would feel supported rather than judged. In tiny ways, Maria was becoming an agent of the same grace that had transformed her own nights from times of anxiety into encounters with peace. This is what happens when you consistently invite divine presence into your most honest moments. The love that meets you in your darkness begins to shine through you in your daily interactions. The peace that calms your anxious thoughts becomes peace that you carry into chaotic situations. The hope that sustains you through difficult nights becomes hope that you can offer to others facing their own darkness. Your family relationships begin to shift in profound ways. That teenage son, who has been testing every boundary, suddenly doesn't trigger the same explosive reactions he once did. Instead of immediately escalating into conflict, you find yourself pausing, remembering your own need for grace at his age, and responding with firm but loving guidance. The spouse who leaves dishes in the sink or forgets to call when running late no longer becomes the target of your accumulated frustrations, but is seen as a fellow human being doing their best to navigate life's complexities. These changes don't happen because you're trying harder to be a better person or because you've enrolled in some advanced relationship course. They happen because your nightly encounters with unconditional love are gradually rewiring your default responses. When you regularly experience divine patience with your own failures and weaknesses, you naturally develop more patience with the failures and weaknesses of others. When you consistently receive grace for your mistakes, grace becomes your instinctive response to the mistakes of those around you. The transformation extends into how you handle your own setbacks and challenges. That project at work that doesn't go according to plan no longer sends you into spirals of self-condemnation. Instead, you find yourself able to acknowledge the disappointment while maintaining perspective about your overall worth and capabilities. The financial unexpected expense that would have previously triggered panic attacks becomes an opportunity to trust in the provision that has never failed you before. The health scare that might have consumed you with fear becomes a reminder of how precious each day is and how important it is to live fully in whatever time you're given. This doesn't mean you become passive or unrealistic about life's challenges. You still take appropriate action, seek necessary help, and work diligently towards solutions. But you do so from a foundation of peace rather than panic, from a place of trust rather than terror, from a position of strength rather than desperation. The same circumstances that once overwhelmed you become manageable when approached with divine resources rather than only human effort. Consider how this transformation affects your decision-making process. Previously, choices might have been driven primarily by fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of financial insecurity, fear of making the wrong choice. Now, while wisdom and prudence still guide your decisions, they're made in consultation with a source of wisdom that transcends your limited perspective. That career change you've been considering for years but were too afraid to pursue suddenly seems possible when you remember that you're not navigating the transition alone. The relationship that needs difficult conversations becomes approachable when you know you'll have divine wisdom to guide your words and divine love to heal whatever wounds might be exposed. Your nights become strategy sessions with the divine, times when you can bring your most complex decisions and receive guidance that considers factors you might never have thought to examine. Not audible instructions or mystical revelations, but the gradual clarification that comes when infinite wisdom illuminates finite understanding. You begin to see options you hadn't considered, resources you hadn't recognized, strengths you hadn't acknowledged. The creative aspects of your life also begin to flourish in unexpected ways. Whether your creativity expresses itself through art, music, writing, cooking, gardening, or simply in how you approach problem solving, you discover that divine presence doesn't stifle creativity but enhances it. The same source that spoke the universe into existence, that painted sunsets and composed the songs of birds, that designed the intricate beauty of flowers and the mathematical precision of snowflakes, delights in partnering with you in your own creative endeavors. Jennifer experienced this when she began inviting divine presence into her struggles with writer's block. For months, she had been staring at blank pages, feeling like her creativity had dried up completely. The stories that once flowed effortlessly from her imagination seemed to have vanished, replaced by harsh internal criticism and paralyzing perfectionism. During her nightly conversations, Jennifer began sharing not just her worries and fears, but also her dreams and aspirations. She talked about the stories she wanted to tell, the characters who lived in her imagination, the messages she hoped to convey through her writing. She asked for help not just with her problems, but with her passions. What happened next surprised her. Instead of receiving dramatic inspiration or mystical downloads of story ideas, Jennifer found that her relationship with her own creativity began to heal. The harsh internal critic that had been silencing her imagination began to quiet, replaced by a gentle encourager who celebrated every small effort and progress. The perfectionism that had paralyzed her began to dissolve, replaced by a joy in the process of creation rather than anxiety about the final product. Stories began to flow again, not because Jennifer had acquired new technical skills or learned better writing techniques, but because she was creating from a place of love rather than fear, from a foundation of acceptance rather than striving for approval. Her characters became more authentic because she was learning to be more authentic herself. Her plots became more compelling because she was discovering the compelling nature of real relationship with the divine. This creative renaissance extended beyond her writing into other areas of her life. She found herself approaching cooking with more experimentation and joy, turning routine meal preparation into opportunities for creative expression. Her interactions with friends became more engaging, as she learned to listen with the same attentiveness she experienced during her nightly conversations with divine presence. Even mundane tasks, like organizing her home, became opportunities for creating beauty and order that reflected the harmony she was experiencing internally. This is what happens when divine presence becomes a regular part of your life. Every aspect of your existence begins to align with the creativity, love, and wisdom that characterize divine nature. You don't lose your individuality or become some generic version of spirituality. Instead, you become more fully yourself, the person you were always meant to be before fear, shame, and life's disappointments began to dim your original design. Your physical health often improves as well, not through miraculous healing necessarily, but through the profound connection between spiritual well-being and physical wellness. The chronic stress that has been wearing down your immune system begins to lift. The tension headaches that plagued your days become less frequent as you learn to release daily burdens through nightly conversations. Sleep itself becomes more restorative when it occurs in the context of trust and surrender rather than anxiety and control. You find yourself making better choices about nutrition, exercise, and self-care, not from grim determination or fear-based motivation, but from a growing appreciation for the body that houses your spirit. When you understand yourself to be fearfully and wonderfully made, when you recognize your physical form as a temple worthy of respect and care, when you see your health as a stewardship rather than just personal preference, taking care of yourself becomes an act of gratitude rather than a burdensome obligation. The financial stress that may have kept you awake nights begins to transform as well. Not necessarily because your income increases or your expenses decrease, though sometimes those changes do occur, but because your relationship with money and security shifts fundamentally. When you've experienced divine provision in unexpected ways, when you've seen needs met through sources you never could have anticipated, when you've learned to distinguish between wants and needs through conversations with infinite wisdom, financial challenges become less terrifying. You develop what might be called holy pragmatism, a combination of practical wisdom and spiritual trust that allows you to take appropriate action while releasing anxiety about outcomes. You budget carefully while trusting in provision. You work diligently while resting in the knowledge that your worth isn't determined by your productivity. You plan wisely while remaining open to the unexpected ways that needs might be met. Mark discovered this during a season of unemployment that stretched much longer than he had anticipated. What began as a temporary setback, he had been laid off from a job he had held for over a decade, extended into months of fruitless job searching, dwindling savings, and growing desperation. The anxiety that accompanied each day of unsuccessful applications and unreturned phone calls was making sleep nearly impossible. When Mark began inviting divine presence into his nightly routine, he didn't expect his employment situation to change immediately. What he hoped for was simply some peace in the midst of his uncertainty, some relief from the anxiety that was consuming his days and haunting his nights. What he received was far more than he had dared to hope for. As Mark shared his fears about financial security, his frustrations with the job market, and his growing sense of inadequacy during his nightly conversations, he began to experience a shift in perspective that surprised him. Instead of seeing his unemployment as a failure or a crisis, he started to recognize it as an opportunity to reevaluate what he truly wanted from his career. What kind of work would bring him satisfaction rather than just a paycheck? More importantly, Mark began to notice provisions appearing in his life that he had previously overlooked or dismissed as coincidence. A neighbor offered him odd jobs that provided just enough income to meet his most pressing needs. A friend mentioned a networking opportunity that led to conversations with people in industries he had never considered. His church offered assistance with groceries and utilities, allowing him to stretch his savings further than he thought possible. None of these were dramatic miracles or supernatural interventions. They were ordinary expressions of human kindness and practical assistance that became visible to Mark as he developed eyes to see divine care working through natural channels. His nightly conversations weren't changing his circumstances through mystical means, but they were changing his perception in ways that allowed him to recognize and receive help that had always been available. When Mark finally did find employment, it was in a field that utilized skills he had never recognized in himself, at a company whose values aligned with his own, doing work that felt meaningful rather than just necessary. The position came through a connection he made during his unemployment, someone he met while doing volunteer work that he had time for only because he wasn't working full-time. Looking back, Mark could see how his season of unemployment, as difficult as it was, had positioned him for opportunities that would never have been available if he had remained in his previous job. This is how divine presence works in the practical aspects of our lives. Not typically through dramatic supernatural intervention, but through the gradual alignment of circumstances, the opening of eyes to see opportunities that were always there, the development of character and skills that prepare us for possibilities we never could have imagined. The conversations that begin in the darkness of our bedrooms influence our daylight decisions, our relationship choices, our career directions, our response to both opportunities and obstacles. Your nights become preparation times for your days, moments when divine wisdom can speak into your subconscious mind, when spiritual strength can be renewed for whatever challenges await, when eternal perspective can reframe temporary difficulties. You go to sleep not as someone trying to escape from life's pressures, but as someone gathering resources for life's adventures. The loneliness that may have driven you to this practice of nightly invitation begins to transform into something unexpected: solitude. Where loneliness is the painful awareness of isolation, solitude is the peaceful appreciation of your own company in the presence of divine love. You discover that you're never truly alone, that even in your most isolated moments, you have access to the most fulfilling relationship possible. This doesn't mean you no longer need or desire human companionship. Rather, it means that your human relationships become healthier because they're no longer burdened with the impossible task of filling every emotional need you have. When you're secure in divine love, you're free to love others without the desperate neediness that can suffocate relationships. When you know yourself to be completely accepted by infinite love, you don't need to perform or pretend to earn human approval. The freedom this brings is remarkable. You can be genuine in your interactions because you're not afraid of rejection. You can admit mistakes because your worth isn't dependent on your perfection. You can set healthy boundaries because you don't need everyone to like you in order to feel valuable. You can give generously because you're not operating from a place of scarcity. You can receive graciously because you're not burdened by the need to earn every good thing that comes your way. This transformation in how you relate to others often leads to deeper, more authentic friendships. People are drawn to those who are genuinely secure, who don't need constant affirmation or validation, who can listen without always needing to be heard, who can offer support without keeping score. Your consistent encounters with divine love gradually develop in you the qualities that make for excellent friendship: patience, kindness, forgiveness, loyalty, wisdom, and compassion. Some of your relationships may change or even end as you become healthier emotionally and spiritually. Connections that were based on mutual dysfunction, shared complaints, or codependent patterns may not survive your transformation into greater wholeness. While this can be painful, it creates space for relationships that are based on mutual respect, shared growth, and genuine care rather than need. New relationships often enter your life during this season of transformation, Relationships with people who are also on journeys of spiritual growth, who share your values and priorities, who can appreciate the changes they see in you and encourage your continued development. These relationships often have a quality of depth and authenticity that you may never have experienced before. Connections that go beyond surface-level compatibility to touch the deeper places of shared purpose and meaning. Your relationship with time itself begins to change as well. Previously, you might have felt constantly behind, always rushing to catch up with an impossible schedule, perpetually stressed about deadlines and commitments. The anxiety about time that kept you awake at night, worrying about tomorrow's schedule, regretting yesterday's inefficiency, feeling overwhelmed by the endless demands on your attention, begins to transform when you learn to bring these concerns into your nightly conversations. Divine wisdom has a way of bringing perspective to our relationship with time that can be revolutionary. When you're connected to the eternal, the urgent seems less urgent. When you're grounded in what truly matters, you develop better discernment about how to invest your limited hours. When you trust in divine timing, you become less frantic about forcing outcomes according to your preferred schedule. This doesn't mean you become lazy or irresponsible. Rather, you develop what might be called holy efficiency, the ability to focus your energy on what truly matters while releasing anxiety about what you cannot control. You learn to work with focused intensity while maintaining inner peace. You discover that you can be fully present in each moment while still planning wisely for the future. Rachel experienced this transformation in her approach to her overpacked schedule. As graduate degree, she'd been living in a constant state of time, a single mother working full-time while pursuing her anxiety. Every day felt like a race against an impossible clock. Every commitment felt overwhelming. Every delay felt catastrophic. Sleep was often sacrificed to the demands of her schedule, and when she did try to rest, her mind would race with lists of everything she hadn't accomplished and everything she needed to do the next day. When Rachel began her practice of nightly divine conversation, one of her most frequent topics was her relationship with time. She would pour out her frustrations about never having enough hours in the day, her guilt about not being able to give her children more attention, her anxiety about falling behind in her studies, her exhaustion from trying to maintain impossible standards in every area of her life. As weeks passed, Rachel began to notice subtle shifts in how she approached her daily schedule. Instead of trying to pack every moment with productive activity, she started to recognize the value of margin. Small spaces of time that could accommodate unexpected needs or opportunities. Instead of multitasking constantly, she began to focus more fully on one thing at a time, discovering that this actually increased her efficiency rather than decreasing it. More significantly, Rachel developed the ability to distinguish between what was truly urgent and what simply felt urgent. Her nightly conversations with divine wisdom helped her gain perspective on which commitments deserved her best energy and which could be eliminated or delegated. She learned to say no to good opportunities in order to say yes to the best ones, to prioritize relationships over achievements when choices had to be made. The change wasn't just in Rachel's external schedule, but in her internal experience of time. She stopped feeling like time was her enemy and started experiencing it as a gift to be stewarded wisely. Her days became less frantic and more purposeful, less scattered and more focused, less anxious and more peaceful. Most remarkably, Rachel discovered that she actually seemed to have more time available when she approached it from a place of trust rather than anxiety. Tasks that once took hours of stressed effort could be completed more quickly when approached with a calm mind. Decisions that once required lengthy deliberation became clearer when made in consultation with divine wisdom. Energy that was previously consumed by worry became available for productive activity. This is one of the paradoxes of inviting divine presence into your practical concerns. When you release your grip on control, you often discover that you have more influence than you realized. When you stop trying to manage every detail of your life through anxious effort, you create space for wisdom and efficiency that surpasses what stress-driven activity can produce. When you trust that there's enough time for what truly matters, you stop wasting time on what doesn't. Your nights become times when you can review the day just past with gratitude rather than regret, when you can approach the day ahead with anticipation rather than anxiety, when you can rest in the knowledge that your times are in divine hands and that each day brings exactly what you need for that day's journey. The practice that began as a desperate attempt to find peace in sleepless nights becomes a comprehensive transformation of how you experience every aspect of life. Work becomes worship. Relationships become opportunities for ministry. Challenges become chances for growth. Time becomes a gift to be savored rather than a resource to be hoarded. Life itself becomes an adventure to be embraced rather than a burden to be endured. And through it all, your nights remain the anchor point, the daily return to the source of strength, wisdom, and love that makes all other transformation possible. The invitation you spoke in darkness continues to echo through your daylight hours, reminding you that you are never alone, never without resources, never beyond the reach of infinite care and concern. Tonight, as you prepare once again to extend that sacred invitation, remember that you're not just asking for better sleep or temporary relief from anxiety. You're opening the door to a way of living that can transform every moment of your existence. Every relationship in your life, every challenge you face, every dream you dare to pursue. You're stepping into the relationship for which you were created, the love for which you were designed, the purpose for which you were born. The invitation remains as simple as ever. Come and be with me tonight. But its implications extend far beyond the darkness of your bedroom, into the bright possibilities of a life lived in conscious partnership with divine love. Your nights of encounter become the foundation for days of purpose, seasons of growth, and a lifetime of meaning that surpasses anything you could create through human effort alone. The transformation that unfolds in your life through this sacred practice creates ripple effects that extend far beyond what you might initially imagine. As divine presence becomes a consistent reality in your nights, you begin to notice something remarkable happening in the most unexpected places and moments. The grocery store checkout line becomes an opportunity for patience. The traffic jam transforms into a moment for reflection. The difficult phone call shifts from a dreaded obligation into a chance to extend grace. Your heart begins to develop what can only be described as divine sensitivity. Where once you might have walked past someone in distress without noticing, now you find yourself naturally attuned to the pain and needs of those around you. The cashier having a difficult day suddenly captures your attention, not as an inconvenience to your schedule, but as a fellow human being who might benefit from a kind word or genuine smile. The elderly neighbor struggling with groceries becomes an opportunity to offer assistance rather than an obstacle to avoid. This heightened awareness doesn't come from trying harder to be a good person or from following some moral checklist. It emerges naturally from a heart that has been consistently filled with divine love during those intimate nighttime conversations. When you regularly experience unconditional acceptance in your most vulnerable moments, something within you begins to overflow with the same acceptance toward others. When you receive patience for your own struggles and failures, patience becomes your instinctive response to the struggles and failures of those you encounter. Consider what happens to your perspective on interruptions and inconveniences. Previously, that unexpected phone call from a friend in crisis might have felt like an unwelcome disruption to your planned evening. The neighbor knocking at your door with a problem might have triggered irritation about your interrupted schedule. The co-worker needing help with a project might have seemed like an imposition on your already full workload. But when your nights are spent in communion with one who never considers your needs an interruption, who never views your problems as inconveniences, who always has time for your concerns, no matter how small they might seem, your own response to others begins to mirror that same availability and care. Interruptions become invitations to participate in divine love. Inconveniences become opportunities to demonstrate the patience you've received. Unexpected demands on your time become chances to give from the abundance you've discovered in divine relationship. This shift doesn't mean you lose appropriate boundaries or become a doormat for others' demands. Rather, you develop the wisdom to distinguish between healthy helping and unhealthy enabling, between genuine need and manipulative behavior, between opportunities for ministry and situations that require professional intervention. The same divine wisdom that speaks to you in your bedroom conversations guides you in these daily decisions about when to engage and when to step back, when to give and when to receive, when to speak and when to listen. Your workplace relationships undergo particularly noticeable transformation. That colleague who consistently takes credit for others' work no longer triggers the same intense anger and resentment. Instead, you find yourself able to see past the behavior to the insecurity that might be driving it. This doesn't mean you become passive or fail to address inappropriate conduct, but you approach these situations with a combination of firmness and compassion that often proves more effective than purely confrontational methods. The boss who micromanages every detail of your work no longer sends you into spirals of frustration and resentment. Instead, you begin to recognize the fear and pressure that might be motivating such behavior. You learn to provide reassurance through consistent performance while gently establishing the trust that allows for greater autonomy. Your response to authority changes from reactive resistance to proactive cooperation, creating an atmosphere where positive change becomes possible. Sarah discovered this transformation during a particularly challenging period with her supervisor. For months, their working relationship had been tense and unproductive, and overall well-being. Her boss seemed to question every decision Sarah made, irony that left Sarah feeling demoralized and defensive approval for even minor choices, and created an atmosphere of constant scrutiny only her work performance, but her sleep. The stress was affecting not, as Sarah began bringing this workplace struggle into her nightly conversations with divine presence, she found herself asking not just for relief from the situation, but for wisdom about how to respond differently. Instead of focusing solely on her boss's unreasonable behavior, she began to consider what fears or pressures might be creating such a need for control. Instead of plotting how to avoid or circumvent her supervisor, she started thinking about ways to build trust and demonstrate reliability. The changes that followed weren't dramatic or immediate, but they were profound. Sarah began providing more detailed updates about her projects before being asked, anticipating questions and addressing concerns proactively. She started seeking her boss's input on decisions while also sharing her reasoning and expertise. Most importantly, she began responding to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness, asking questions that helped her understand expectations rather than immediately defending her choices. Over time, the dynamic between Sarah and her supervisor began to shift. As Sarah demonstrated consistent competence and reliability, the micromanagement gradually decreased. As she showed respect for her boss's concerns while also sharing her own expertise, a more collaborative relationship began to emerge. The workplace stress that had once consumed Sarah's thoughts during her nighttime hours was replaced by satisfaction in a working relationship that, while not perfect, had become mutually respectful and productive. This is what happens when divine wisdom informs your approach to difficult relationships. You don't become a pushover or abandon appropriate assertiveness, but you do develop the ability to respond rather than react, to seek understanding rather than vindication, to build bridges rather than walls. The peace you experience in your bedroom conversations translates into peaceful responses to interpersonal conflict. Your family relationships also experience remarkable healing and growth. The teenage daughter who once triggered explosive arguments with her attitude and choices suddenly doesn't push the same buttons she used to. Instead of immediately escalating into conflict, you find yourself remembering your own adolescent struggles and responding with the kind of patient guidance you wish you had received at that age. The spouse who leaves dishes in the sink or forgets to pick up items from the store no longer becomes the target of accumulated frustrations, but is seen as a partner who, like you, is doing their best to manage multiple responsibilities. These changes don't happen because you're trying harder to be a better family member or because you've learned new communication techniques, though those tools certainly have their place. They happen because your regular encounters with unconditional love are gradually rewiring your default responses to the people closest to you. When you consistently experience divine patience with your own failures and shortcomings, patience becomes your natural response to the failures and shortcomings of those you love. The parenting challenges that once seemed insurmountable begin to feel manageable when approached with divine resources. The strong-willed child who tests every boundary doesn't trigger the same explosive reactions. Instead, you find yourself able to maintain calm authority while addressing behavior issues. The academic struggles of another child don't send you into panic about their future, but become opportunities to provide support and encouragement while trusting that each child has their own timeline for growth and development. Marriage conflicts, which once escalated quickly into painful arguments or cold standoffs, begin to transform into opportunities for deeper understanding and connection. Instead of immediately defending your position or attacking your spouse's character, you find yourself able to pause, to consider their perspective, to respond with curiosity rather than accusation. The same divine love that accepts you in your most difficult moments begins to flow through you toward your spouse in their most challenging moments. Extended family relationships, which may have been sources of ongoing stress and conflict, begin to shift as you develop the ability to maintain your own peace regardless of others' choices or behaviors. The critical relative who always finds fault with your decisions no longer has the power to ruin family gatherings. The family member who consistently creates drama no longer pulls you into their chaos. You learn to engage with love while maintaining appropriate boundaries, to participate in family events while not taking responsibility for others' emotions or reactions. This transformation extends to how you handle your children's struggles and disappointments. When your child faces rejection from friends, struggles with academic challenges, or makes poor choices that result in natural consequences, you find yourself able to provide support and guidance without taking on their pain as your own. You develop the wisdom to know when to rescue and when to allow learning through experience, when to offer advice, and when to simply listen. The teenage years, which many parents approach with dread, become opportunities for deeper relationship rather than periods of constant conflict. You learn to see the developing adult within the challenging adolescent, to respond to the heart behind the attitude, to maintain connection even when setting firm boundaries. The same acceptance you receive in your darkest moments becomes acceptance you can offer to your teenager in their most difficult phases. Your response to your children's achievements also changes in beautiful ways. Instead of living vicariously through their successes or feeling that their accomplishments somehow validate your parenting, you learn to celebrate their gifts and efforts while maintaining your own sense of identity and worth. You become able to support their dreams without imposing your unfulfilled ambitions, to guide their choices without controlling their paths. The financial pressures that affect so many families begin to feel less overwhelming when addressed through the lens of divine provision and wisdom. Instead of constant anxiety about money, you develop what might be called holy pragmatism. The ability to make wise financial decisions while trusting that needs will be met. You learn to distinguish between wants and needs, to live within your means while still enjoying life's pleasures, to save wisely while also giving generously. Family decisions about major purchases, career changes or relocations are made in consultation with divine wisdom rather than driven purely by fear or ambition. You develop the ability to weigh practical considerations alongside spiritual promptings, to consider long-term implications while remaining open to unexpected opportunities. The stress that once accompanied every financial decision is replaced by confident trust in guidance that considers factors you might never think to examine. Your children begin to notice and benefit from these changes in your approach to life and relationships. They observe how you handle stress, how you treat other people, how you respond to disappointments and setbacks. Without preaching or lecturing, you become a living example of what it looks like to navigate life's challenges with divine resources. Your transformation becomes a gift to the next generation, showing them possibilities for living that they might never have imagined. The influence extends to how you approach your children's spiritual development. Instead of trying to force religious observance or impose specific beliefs, you find yourself naturally sharing the reality of divine love through your actions and attitudes. Your children see the peace that characterizes your responses to crisis, the joy that underlies your daily activities, the hope that sustains you through difficult seasons. They witness firsthand what it looks like to live in conscious relationship with divine love. Some of your children may express curiosity about the changes they observe in you. They might ask why you seem calmer, why you don't get as angry as you used to, why you seem more patient with their mistakes. These become natural opportunities to share about the relationship that has transformed your nights and consequently your days. Not as forced evangelism or religious pressure, but as honest testimony about what you've discovered to be true and valuable in your own experience. Your home begins to take on a different atmosphere as well. The tension that once characterized family gatherings begins to dissipate. The anxiety that used to permeate the household during stressful periods is replaced by an underlying sense of security and peace. Visitors often comment on the welcoming feeling in your home, the sense of acceptance and warmth that greets them at your door. This doesn't mean your family becomes perfect or that all conflicts disappear. Disagreements still arise, mistakes are still made, and challenges continue to test your patience and wisdom. But these normal aspects of family life are held within a context of love and acceptance that makes them manageable rather than devastating. Problems become opportunities for growth rather than threats to relationships. Conflicts become chances for deeper understanding rather than battles to be won or lost. The bedtime routines in your household begin to reflect the importance you've discovered in ending each day well. Instead of allowing children to fall asleep in front of screens or with anxious thoughts about tomorrow's challenges, you begin to create rituals that promote peace and security. Bedtime prayers become natural expressions of gratitude and trust rather than religious obligations. Conversations about the day's experiences become opportunities to process both joys and difficulties in healthy ways. Your children learn by observation and participation what it means to end each day by releasing worries and celebrating blessings. They see you modeling the practice of bringing concerns to divine attention rather than carrying them alone. They experience the peace that comes from knowing they're loved unconditionally, that their mistakes don't define their worth, that they have access to wisdom and strength beyond their own limited resources. As your children grow and face increasingly complex challenges, they have a foundation of security that enables them to navigate difficulties with confidence. They know they can bring any struggle to you without fear of judgment or rejection because they've experienced your consistent acceptance through their various phases of development. More importantly, they know they can bring any concern to divine attention because they've witnessed the reality of that relationship in your own life. The generational impact of your transformation begins to extend beyond your immediate family. Extended family members notice the changes in your responses to traditional family stresses. The holiday gatherings that once ended in arguments or hurt feelings become more peaceful as you model different ways of handling disagreements and disappointments. Siblings who may have had strained relationships with you begin to experience your acceptance and patience in new ways. Your parents, if they're still living, may notice that you no longer react to their comments or behaviors with the same intensity or defensiveness that characterized your earlier interactions. This doesn't mean you become passive or fail to maintain appropriate boundaries, but you develop the ability to respond to them from a place of security rather than neediness, from adult confidence rather than childlike reactivity. The healing that begins in your bedroom conversations extends backward through time, bringing resolution to old hurts and patterns that may have affected your family for generations. You find yourself able to forgive offenses that once seemed unforgivable, not because the wounds were insignificant, but because you've experienced the kind of love that makes forgiveness possible. You develop compassion for the struggles and limitations of previous generations, recognizing that they too were doing their best with the resources and understanding available to them. This generational healing creates space for new traditions and healthier patterns to emerge in your family system. Instead of unconsciously repeating dysfunctional cycles, you begin to establish rhythms and practices that reflect your growing understanding of divine love and wisdom. Family gatherings become opportunities for connection rather than sources of stress. Celebrations become expressions of gratitude rather than competitions for attention or approval. Your transformation becomes a gift not only to your immediate family, but to the broader community as well. Friends and neighbors begin to seek you out for advice and support, sensing something in your presence that they long for in their own lives. Your consistent peace in the midst of common stresses, your patient responses to difficult people, your hopeful outlook despite realistic awareness of life's challenges, all of these qualities make you someone others want to be around and learn from. The influence spreads through your workplace, your neighborhood, your children's schools, your volunteer activities, and every other sphere where your life intersects with others. You become an agent of the same transformation you've experienced, not through preaching or trying to convert others to your specific practices, but simply by living as someone who has discovered the reality of divine love and allows that reality to shape every aspect of existence. Tonight, as you prepare once again to extend that sacred invitation that has become the anchor of your transformation, remember that you're participating in something far larger than personal peace or better sleep. You're stepping into a relationship that has the power to heal not only your own life, but to create ripples of healing that extend through your family, your community, and even future generations you may never meet. The invitation remains beautifully simple. Come and be with me tonight. But its implications extend far beyond your bedroom into a way of living that transforms everything it touches, creating islands of peace in a chaotic world, beacons of hope in dark seasons, and demonstrations of what becomes possible when ordinary human beings discover their capacity for extraordinary love through divine relationship. As you settle into your bed tonight, carrying within your heart the accumulated wisdom of countless conversations with divine love, you might find yourself amazed at how far you've traveled from that first desperate whisper into the darkness. The person who initially spoke those words of invitation, that soul weary from carrying burdens alone, anxious about tomorrow's uncertainties, longing for peace that seemed impossibly distant, that person feels like a memory from another lifetime. Yet the journey continues to unfold in ways that surprise and delight you. Each night brings new depths of relationship, fresh insights into the character of divine love, deeper understanding of your own identity as someone cherished beyond measure. The conversations that once felt awkward or uncertain have evolved into the most natural thing in the world, as easy as breathing, as essential as your heartbeat. Your spiritual senses have become increasingly refined through this consistent practice. Where once you might have struggled to recognize divine guidance or comfort, now you find yourself naturally attuned to the subtle ways that infinite love communicates with finite hearts. The gentle impression that guides a difficult decision. The unexpected memory that brings exactly the encouragement needed in a challenging moment. The perfect timing of a friend's phone call just when isolation threatens to overwhelm. The song that plays on the radio with lyrics that speak directly to your current situation. These are no longer dismissed as coincidences, but recognized as love letters from heaven, personal messages from the one who knows your every need before you voice it, who cares about details so small that others might consider them insignificant. The God who numbers the hairs on your head and notices when sparrows fall is the same God who orchestrates moments of grace in your daily experience, weaving together circumstances in ways that demonstrate infinite care and perfect timing. Your bedroom has truly become a sanctuary, a place where heaven consistently meets earth in the most intimate way possible. The very atmosphere feels different when you enter that space each evening, charged with expectation and rich with the accumulated presence of countless encounters. Your pillow has become an altar where you lay down each day's burdens and receive each night's grace. Your blanket has become a covering, not just for your physical body, but for your weary soul, representing the divine protection that watches over you through every vulnerable hour. The transformation has become so thorough that others frequently comment on the change they observe in your demeanor, your responses, your overall approach to life's challenges. Family members mention your increased patience, your calmer presence during stressful situations, your ability to bring peace into tense moments. Colleagues notice your enhanced creativity, your improved problem-solving abilities, your natural tendency to see possibilities where others see only obstacles. Friends seek your counsel not because you've become some kind of spiritual expert or acquired special religious credentials, but because they recognize something authentic in your presence that they hunger for in their own lives. They see someone who has discovered a source of strength that sustains them through difficulties, a wellspring of peace that remains constant despite changing circumstances, a foundation of joy that weathers storms and seasons of sorrow. You find yourself becoming a safe harbor for others who are navigating their own dark nights of the soul. People naturally confide in you because they sense your ability to listen without judgment, to offer comfort without trying to fix everything, to provide hope without minimizing their pain. The same acceptance you receive in your nightly conversations flows through you toward others who are struggling, creating spaces where healing can begin and authentic transformation becomes possible. Your response to suffering, both your own and others, has undergone a profound shift. Where once you might have been overwhelmed by the pain you witnessed or experienced, now you've learned to hold space for difficulty while maintaining hope for resolution. You've discovered that divine love doesn't promise the absence of suffering, but guarantees presence in the midst of it, companionship through the valley, strength for each step of the journey. This understanding has made you a more effective comforter, a more reliable friend, a more compassionate family member. When others face loss, disappointment, or crisis, you're able to sit with them in their pain without trying to rush them toward healing or offer quick solutions that minimize their experience. You've learned the ministry of presence, the healing power of being truly seen and heard in one's darkest moments. The ripple effects continue to expand in directions you never could have anticipated when you first whispered that invitation into the darkness. Your transformation has influenced your children's understanding of what's possible in human relationships, their expectations of how conflict can be resolved, their beliefs about their own worth and potential. They're growing up with a foundation of security that will serve them throughout their lives. A template for handling stress and uncertainty that comes from witnessing divine resources at work in practical situations. Your marriage, if you're married, has been touched by grace in ways that have surprised both you and your spouse. The patience you've developed through nightly encounters with infinite patience naturally extends to your partner's struggles and shortcomings. The forgiveness you regularly receive for your own failures makes it possible to offer genuine forgiveness when your spouse disappoints or hurts you. The unconditional love you experience in your most vulnerable moments creates capacity for loving your partner even when they're not at their best. If you're single, the security you've found in divine relationship has freed you from the desperate need for human partnership that can make dating relationships unhealthy and codependent. You're able to approach potential relationships from a place of wholeness rather than neediness, seeking companionship rather than completion, looking for someone to share your life with rather than someone to fix what's broken in you. The workplace that once felt like a battlefield has become an arena for ministry, though not the pushy, uncomfortable kind that makes people want to avoid you. Instead, your consistent peace in stressful situations, your patient responses to difficult personalities, your creative solutions to complex problems, your willingness to help without keeping score, all of these qualities make you someone others want to work with and learn from. Your approach to career decisions has been transformed by regular consultation with infinite wisdom. Choices about job changes, educational pursuits, or professional development are made in partnership with one who sees the end from the beginning, who understands how each decision fits into the larger pattern of your life's purpose. This doesn't mean you receive mystical revelations about your career path, but rather that you develop sensitivity to the ways opportunities align with your gifts, values, and calling. The financial anxiety that may have once kept you awake at night has given way to a profound trust in divine provision that doesn't eliminate the need for wisdom and hard work, but removes the paralyzing fear that can prevent good decision-making. You've learned to distinguish between needs and wants, to live generously within your means, to save wisely while also giving freely, to work diligently while resting in the knowledge that your security doesn't depend solely on your efforts. Your relationship with possessions has shifted dramatically. The accumulation of things no longer holds the same appeal it once did, replaced by an appreciation for experiences, relationships, and opportunities to serve others. You find yourself naturally gravitating towards simplicity, not as a forced discipline, but as a natural expression of someone who has discovered that the most valuable things in life cannot be purchased or possessed. The community around you has been touched by your transformation in ways both obvious and subtle. Your neighborhood is a little kinder because of your presence. Your church, if you attend one, is more welcoming because of your example. Your children's school is more peaceful because of how you interact with teachers and administrators. Every sphere where your life intersects with others has been influenced by the love that flows through you as a result of your nightly encounters with divine presence. You've become someone who naturally notices those who are overlooked or marginalized, who extends kindness to service workers, who offers patience to elderly people who move slowly, who provides encouragement to young people who are struggling to find their way. These responses aren't calculated acts of goodness, but spontaneous expressions of a heart that has been consistently filled with divine love. Your capacity for joy has expanded in remarkable ways. Simple pleasures that you might have rushed past in your former anxiety-driven lifestyle now capture your attention and fill you with gratitude. The taste of morning coffee, the warmth of sunlight streaming through your window, the sound of laughter from your children, the beauty of flowers blooming in your garden, all of these ordinary miracles are received as gifts from a loving Creator who delights in blessing His children. Even your response to beauty has deepened. Art, music, literature, and nature speak to you with greater intensity because your spiritual senses have been awakened through consistent divine encounter. You see God's fingerprints in sunset colors, hear his voice in symphony melodies, sense his presence in moments of profound, natural beauty. The world itself has become a cathedral where every element declares the glory and creativity of its maker. Your understanding of prayer has evolved far beyond the formal religious activity you might have once imagined it to be. Prayer has become as natural as conversation with a beloved friend, as spontaneous as sharing exciting news with someone who cares, as comfortable as sitting in companionable silence with someone whose presence alone brings peace. You find yourself in ongoing dialogue with divine love throughout your days, not as religious obligation, but as the overflow of authentic relationship. The seasons of difficulty that still come, because life remains life with all its complexity and challenge, are navigated with resources you never possessed before. Loss still brings grief, but grief that is held within hope. Disappointment still stings, but disappointment that doesn't destroy faith. Uncertainty still creates anxiety, but anxiety that coexists with trust. You've learned that divine presence doesn't eliminate human emotions, but provides context that prevents any single emotion from defining your entire reality. Your nights have become launching pads for your days, times when divine wisdom can speak into upcoming decisions, when spiritual strength can be renewed for anticipated challenges, when eternal perspective can reframe temporary difficulties. You go to sleep not as someone escaping from life's pressures, but as someone gathering resources for life's adventures, collecting grace for grace, storing up strength for whatever tomorrow may require. The practice that began as a desperate attempt to find peace in sleepless hours has become the cornerstone of a completely transformed existence. Work has become worship. Relationships have become opportunities for ministry. Challenges have become chances for growth. Time has become a gift to be savored rather than a resource to be hoarded. Life itself has become an adventure to be embraced rather than a burden to be endured. Tonight, as you prepare once again to extend that sacred invitation that has become as essential as breathing, remember that you're not just maintaining a spiritual discipline or following a religious routine. You're participating in the relationship for which you were created, accessing the love that has been seeking you since before time began, stepping into the purpose that gives meaning to every moment of your existence. The invitation remains beautifully simple, yet its implications continue to expand into areas of your life you haven't even discovered yet. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to live from the overflow of divine love. Next week will present fresh challenges that can be met with supernatural resources. The months and years ahead hold possibilities for growth, service, and joy that you can't even imagine from your current perspective. Your bedroom awaits, transformed from a place of worry and restlessness into a sanctuary of peace and encounter. Your pillow calls, no longer just a place to rest your weary head, but an altar where heaven touches earth in the most personal way possible. Your blanket beckons, offering not just physical warmth, but the covering of divine protection through every vulnerable hour of sleep. The words are ready on your lips, worn smooth by countless repetitions, yet fresh with anticipation for tonight's unique encounter. Come and be with me tonight. And with those simple words, you open the door once again to the relationship that transforms everything it touches, the love that makes all things new, the presence that turns ordinary nights into extraordinary encounters with the divine. As you speak those words tonight, something profound happens in the spiritual realm that your physical senses may not immediately detect, but your soul recognizes with perfect clarity. The invitation you extend doesn't simply echo into empty space or fade into the silence of your room. Instead, it travels directly to the heart of infinite love, where it is received with joy that surpasses human understanding, welcomed with an eagerness that defies description, and answered with a presence that transforms everything it touches. Feel the shift beginning even now as you prepare for this sacred encounter. The very air in your room seems to become more breathable, charged with possibility and thick with anticipation. The walls that once felt like barriers now feel like protective boundaries, creating a holy sanctuary where vulnerability is safe and authenticity is celebrated. Your bed transforms from merely a place of physical rest into an altar of surrender, a meeting place between heaven and earth, a threshold where the finite touches the infinite. Notice how your body begins to respond to this approaching presence. The tension that has been your constant companion throughout the day starts to release from muscles you didn't even realize were clenched. Your breathing naturally deepens, no longer the shallow, anxious gasps of someone perpetually braced for crisis, but the steady, peaceful rhythm of someone who knows safety has arrived. Your heart rate slows to a calmer cadence, your shoulders drop from their defensive position, your jaw unclenches from its worried grip. This isn't merely relaxation in the physical sense, though that certainly occurs. This is your entire being recognizing that the help you've been longing for has arrived, that the companionship you've been craving is now available, that the love you've been seeking has been seeking you with even greater intensity. Every cell in your body seems to exhale in relief. Every thought in your mind begins to quiet its anxious chatter. Every emotion in your heart starts to find its proper place within the context of divine care. Tonight doesn't have to end the way it began. The weight on your shoulders, the questions in your mind, the burdens you've carried alone, none of these have to define your tomorrow. In this sacred moment before sleep, you hold in your hands the key to transformation that extends far beyond rest. When you whisper those simple words, "Come and be with me tonight," you're not just inviting better sleep. You're opening the door to a relationship that will revolutionize every aspect of your existence, turning your darkest nights into your most powerful encounters with divine love.